By the time Black Ops 2 came out, I was pretty tired of Call of Duty. When the trailer dropped, I remember thinking, really? Another one? We've been releasing COD games every year now for over a decade. Little did I know another decade of Call of Duty was waiting for me on the horizon. I honestly didn't even remember playing Black Ops 2 because I played through the entire campaign on a treadmill while I was trying to lose weight. I was literally experiencing one of the best stories in any shooter, and I didn't appreciate it because I was too busy.
Keep breathing. That's the key. Breathe. Oh.
Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because after replaying this title, I realized it's subjectively the best COD game ever released. It may not be my personal favorite, but the quality of the experience is hard to argue, especially when you compare it to the modern schlock we get from the shooter genre now. Many people considered COD games at this time to be AAA garbage, a game with a full campaign, multiplayer, and zombies mode. Funny, when today AAA often means buy the alpha build and maybe in 2 years from now we'll have the full product finished for you. It's crazy. But not as crazy as me overlooking this game for over 10 years. I used to take this classic for granted, but no longer. Let's have a look at the story.
Did he go out like a soldier? Don't you tell me that fat fucking slob took him out. Don't you tell me that. You didn't go down like that, kid.
The game takes place in two separate time periods, the 80s and the distant future of 2025. We also follow multiple characters, Frank Woods, Alex Mason, his son David Mason, and our iconic villain, Raul Menendez. Similar to the previous Black Ops title, the narrative revolves around a fictionalized version of Cold War history, specifically the illegal operations conducted by the US in Central America. At least things like the Iran-Contra affair would have been illegal back then. After the recent Supreme Court ruling, Ronald Reagan could have snorted coke off Gorbachev's cock, and it would be all good as long as it was an official action.
Mr. Gorbachev.
When we're not experiencing retro high treason, we're experiencing futuristic anarchy. 2025 seemed like a long way out back in 2012. But despite that being the case, the narrative makes some pretty accurate observations on what motivated the world stage back in the 80s. And in the future. We didn't get nanoglyphs or mechs to fight our wars, but the motivations of the powerful are described perfectly in Black Ops 2. I like the way Woods puts it.
Now, the politicians, they want you to think this is about ideology. It's a lot of horse shit.
Politics aside, the narrative does take a bit of a neutral view. The villains in the game are clearly bad for humanity, but their motives are understandable. Enter one of the most complex characters I've witnessed, Raul Menendez. Menendez is a Nicaraguan who was forced to watch his country torn apart by civil war, that in many ways was funded by the United States. Not only that, but his sister, who he loved very dearly, was horribly disfigured in a fire started by an American trying to collect insurance money by burning down his factory. This was enough for Menendez to be radicalized against the US. But after his sister was killed during a raid conducted by American soldiers, he transformed into the harbinger of death for the US. At least we got one of the greatest line deliveries ever out of it.
Menendez! No!
Without going into too much detail, I know exactly what it's like to have your loved one taken from you due to the negligence and selfishness of others. I do not justify Menendez or his actions. He's a monster, but I understand why he's become this way. When something like that happens to a person, they often become angry at the world, and are willing to burn it all down as long as the people responsible for their pain burn with it. What I'm saying is Menendez is the best kind of villain. He's complex and his actions will have you asking yourself,
are we the baddies?
We're not, but it's hard not to feel that way when you're sitting across from the man. It's even harder to make sense of it all when you see Woods and Menendez's hatred for one another. Both of these men do horrible things while walking the path of revenge. It consumes them. Remember that this thought-provoking, nuanced narrative is coming from a Call of Duty game. It's hard to believe a COD game's story can be this good. But it is. How do they go from this masterwork of storytelling to
Train go boom?
It was also cool to see more people from Cold War history pop up again. No US presidents this time, but we did get warmongers like Jonas Savimbi and Manuel Noriega. I appreciate that Treyarch didn't shy away from the more unsavory parts of the Cold War when making this game. It would have been easy to make this an advertisement for the US military, but they didn't go that direction. Instead, they showed how the road of good intentions is paved with the deaths of millions. You can even be nuanced with the choices in this game. Call of Duty had never seen narrative choices or multiple endings before, so it was exciting to see that addition. I was allowed to make my own choices during this plunge into depravity, which allowed me to conclude I can't make tough calls much better than the powers that be, because I got the worst ending possible.
What'd you learn from that?
There's even personal growth seen with our main protagonist, David. Alex Mason wasn't a good father, and watching David learn to appreciate his dad for who he was, and not how he raised him, was interesting. Again, all this comes from a series that would later go on to make
There ain't gonna be any ghosts.
How the mighty have fallen. But hey, at least we have this classic. Let's see if the gameplay holds up as much as the story. While the shooting of Black Ops 2 feels largely the same as Black Ops 1, some profound innovation was seen elsewhere. Each level in the campaign now starts with a mission briefing screen that allows players to customize their weapons, equipment, and even their gun camos. This means you don't have to tackle every mission the same way. There is a bit of wiggle room in this linear shooter, or maybe not so linear. If you have sharp enough eyes, you can not only find intel, but weapon caches that give you a little extra firepower. Even better, this game started the futuristic trend all Call of Duty fans love. Okay, maybe the community didn't love the futuristic era. Still, the community does love Black Ops 2, and I think that's due to the mix of the Cold War era weapons and the hypothetical futuristic weaponry we get out of this game. Battle mechs, VTOLs, drones. Well, that one isn't so hypothetical when you consider what's happening in Eastern Europe. Side missions were also added to this game. These Strike Force missions have light RTS mechanics that honestly made me wish that they would make a Call of Duty game surrounding this. Players are given a select number of units to complete missions. You will be able to switch between them and direct their assault in a more strategic way. When things get a little bit too hairy, you can assume control of one of these units. That way you can gun down these socialist bastards appropriately.
Targeting enemy infantry. One less hostile ASD.
The Strike Force missions are actually the most challenging sections of the campaign, which brings me to one of the few complaints I had with Black Ops 2. The complaint is related to the difficulty. The game isn't very hard at all, except for a few sections. This is the easiest COD I've ever played. In my Black Ops 1 video, I said that Call of Duty games were incredibly difficult on Veteran even years after that title, but I was mistaken. Maybe it had something to do with the treadmill. To circle back to the narrative choices, I'd like to mention that most of these decisions aren't black and white or clearly presented. I wouldn't have noticed a couple of them unless I was prompted with an achievement, and that level of subtlety is always appreciated, especially if I'm not 100% sure if I just committed a war crime or not. The futuristic weaponry doesn't stop at some RC Doomcopters or flashy guns. Futuristic aircraft and cars litter the battlefield, and you even get to operate a few for some missions. Maybe you're a person who enjoys the simpler forms of transportation. There's a mission where you get to ride horseback, and you get to roll with some friendly fellows who call themselves the Mujahideen. The US government seems to like these guys, so they must be a good group of people, and I'm sure they always will be. Once you complete the campaign, check the leaderboard to compare with your friends. It turns out I don't just suck at versus matches, I also suck at playing campaign. Speaking of versus matches, how did the multiplayer age? I've seen people call this the best COD multiplayer, so let's see if that statement holds true.
Friendly UAV inbound.
Many people in the COD community consider Black Ops 2 to be the gold standard in the series when it comes to the franchise's multiplayer. While I may not entirely agree, I can respect the argument. This multiplayer mode saw huge balancing changes, ultimately leading to a more even experience for most players. Not only that, but the game also includes a whopping 31 maps, assuming you're willing to pay full price for 10-year-old DLCs. I'm not going to dwell on that point considering I went into detail on that complaint in my Black Ops 1 video, but I wanted to mention it here at least once, because you know, it's fucking bullshit. I digress. What exactly are the innovations Black Ops 2's multiplayer brought to the table? There are two big ones, the Pick 10 system for the class customization, and score streaks. Let's start with the Pick 10 system. Since Call of Duty 4, players could customize their classes with a strict set of parameters. You had to have 3 perks unless you carried specific explosives, then you only had 2 perks available, and the amount of equipment that a player could take into a match was already set. There was very little wiggle room for customization in previous COD titles. That all changed with the Pick 10 system. Now players can mix and match the amount of equipment and perks they use. If you want to take more grenades into combat or have more attachments on your gun, this is now possible as long as the total amount of equipment and perks adds up to 10. Granted, the max amount of perks that you were allowed to carry still was 3, but if you wanted to take some off to get more equipment, that option was available to you. This allowed players to customize their playstyle more than ever before. If you want to rock a tricked out shotgun with no sidearm and a belt full of flashbangs, you can. The other big addition I mentioned was the score streaks. In my humble opinion, the score streak system is the best change ever made to a Call of Duty. I say this because it encourages team-based play. Instead of a player camping in their preferred spot to rack up kills, I noticed my teammates playing in a cooperative mindset. You gain points from assists, destroying enemy equipment, along with kills. So if you're racking up those assists, you can still expect to obtain one of the game's many streak abilities, which includes all the futuristic tech you could ever want. My favorite is the flying drone, because goddamn is it lethal.
Inbound.
The multiplayer mode feels super fleshed out, with returning mechanics like prestige tokens, detailed leaderboards, and a theater mode. Holy shit, they polished the hell out of this game. Is there anything I don't love about the competitive multiplayer? Well, yes, even though there's a huge variety of maps that include remakes of classics from other Treyarch games, I did feel like there was an overemphasis on how open areas are, and how many angles players can get on one another. This game is a haven for players who like to quickscope and stay at range when combating the enemy. I lost count of how many times I'd be walking through the map just to have my head explode. Most of the time I didn't even know where the shots came from. The more multiplayer I played, the more I felt like this guy. This is more of a nitpick, because as I said, there are still a wide variety of maps, so you won't always have to deal with that bullshit. And if you get tired of being a scrub in the versus multiplayer, you can always try your hand at the zombies mode. Black Ops 2 is where Treyarch fully leaned into fleshing out the zombies mode. There are 6 maps in total, and they all have unique mechanics from one another, whether it be the enemies that you fight, or how the environment behaves around you. For example, Mob of the Dead has berserker-like enemies, while Origins has giant robots you'll need to navigate to complete the Easter egg. Speaking of Easter eggs, if you thought Black Ops 1 had some elaborate secrets, you'll be shocked at what they've done with this sequel. Almost every zombie map is now built around the Easter egg, even going as far as including cutscenes, and a way for players to beat the map entirely. This is a cool addition, and allowed the developers to have a field day with the different themes seen in the maps. What other game can you navigate an old western town, or fight through a steampunk-inspired World War I battlefield? While I do prefer just surviving in the maps for high rounds over going for the Easter eggs, I still appreciate the effort on display here. I'd also be lying if I said I didn't enjoy how the Easter eggs fleshed out the lore of zombies, even if it's convoluted as hell. I mean, Agartha, Apothicons, I might as well be speaking in tongues to the uninformed ear. Black Ops 2 Zombies also saw the addition of buildable items, and a decent amount of new cast members to add to the fray. I don't find any of these newcomers as interesting as the Ultimus crew, but some new faces are always welcome. We all know Misty is known for her friendly face after all.
Nice. Nice.
I'm about to wrap up the multiplayer section, but I'd like to share a warning before I do. I was under the impression that the older Call of Duty games servers were being monitored on consoles, but after playing these titles online for about 2 weeks now, I can confirm.
That is not correct.
You will absolutely encounter hackers from time to time. Black Ops 2 has a higher player base compared to other old COD games, so the chances of running into one of these sad individuals are basically doubled. It's a shame these people are so pathetic they need validation from ruining other players' fun. If only they had gotten more hugs from mommy and daddy when they were growing up, or maybe their parents just abandoned them entirely because they knew they were going to grow up to be a hacking loser. Let's be honest, it's probably that option, but I've wasted enough air talking about these individuals. How did the presentation stack up with this sequel? Out of all the Call of Duties, Black Ops 2 has one of the most recognizable identities, not only due to the futuristic aesthetic, but also because of the amazing actors that bring our characters to life. We have our returning voice actors Sam Worthington and James C. Burns, but we also have some significant star power to flex that Activision money. Tony Todd, Michael Rooker, and Michael fucking Keaton, who replaced Ed Harris as Hudson. I was bummed when I realized Harris wouldn't be returning, but if you're gonna replace General Francis X. Hummel with anyone, it might as well be Batman. Call of Duty really attracted everybody at this time. This is a bit of a tangent, but do you remember that trailer with Robert Downey Jr. flying the jet? They had enough money to blow on one of the highest paid actors of all time. And FPS Russia. Whatever happened to that guy anyway? Oh. Back to a more positive topic, sound design overall is excellent. The guns have some meaty sound effects to accompany each shot, and the music. Oh my god, that music. You go to a lot of different countries in this game, and I noticed the scenery would not only change, but so would the location's theme. Whether it be the mountains of Afghanistan or the tropical climate of Panama, you can expect some music fitting the location. I couldn't talk about the music without mentioning the spectacular main theme. When you hear this track, it basically tells you everything you need to know about the experience you're about to have. There will be futuristic tech, mystery, and tension throughout. My only complaint regarding the sound is during some of the in-engine cutscenes, the audio mixing is a little weird, mainly when it comes to the weaponry. It's not super common, but when someone fires their weapon during these cutscenes, they don't sound as powerful as when you're using them in combat. Oddly enough, the sound design is great everywhere else, so I'm not sure what happened here. But can I really complain when I get to hear Camar de los Reyes as Menendez? I don't think so.
Your life will be consumed by absolute loss. Then and only then will you understand what you have done to me.
That motherfucker cold.
Lastly, I'd like to mention the graphics. There was only a 2-year gap between Black Ops 1 and 2, so the jump in the visual quality isn't crazy. But there are some notable improvements. For example, the facial animations have been improved, making them on par with modern standards. And oh my god is this game gory. The opening level sees a man burned alive and a decapitation. Honestly, it's a little jarring how graphic and dark this game can get at times. It's even more jarring when you complete the game. Like I said, I got the worst ending, and it turned my stomach a bit. So imagine my surprise when that unsettling feeling was followed by confusion due to an Avenged Sevenfold concert. I've had a lot of fun revisiting these older Call of Duties. I was planning on covering the OG Modern Warfare trilogy before covering Black Ops 2, but I wanted to see what all the fuss was about. I took Black Ops 2 for granted when it was first released, and ever since then I've watched it become the golden boy of the franchise. I didn't understand why that was the case until I replayed it. And now that I have, I can honestly say it's in my top 5 COD games of all time. Nostalgia will always win for me, so I can't put it above these 3 titles, but I can't argue with anyone who puts it in their one spot. Black Ops 2 is truly amazing, and it reminded me that Call of Duty can be so much more than just another shooter. I'll have to replay Modern Warfare 2 and 3 to see if they hold up as well as this game. Both of those titles are on my list, but I'm not sure when I'll get to them, because
Nah, I'm just fucking lazy.
that's it for me. And as always, thank you for your time.